Your father's restaurant is closing. We're having one last family dinner tonight to say goodbye, my brother Marcus's text read. I stared at my phone, my coffee growing cold beside my laptop. Dad's restaurant, El Sabor de Casa, had been a cornerstone of Chicago's Little Village neighborhood for 40 years. It couldn't just be closing. I immediately called Marcus. No answer. I tried Dad's cell, then the restaurant's landline. Nothing. With growing unease, I grabbed my coat and headed for my car. The January wind bit through my clothes as I hurried across the parking lot, my mind racing with questions. Why hadn't anyone told me about this earlier? Why was I only hearing about it now, apparently hours before the final dinner? The drive from my apartment in Lincoln Park to Little Village took forever, Chicago traffic conspiring against my urgency. When I finally turned onto 26th Street, my heart stopped. El Sabor de Casa's windows were dark, a closed sign hanging crookedly on the door. This was wrong. All wrong. I parked and tried the door. Locked. Peering through the window, I could see chairs stacked on tables, but no signs of any family dinner preparations. With trembling fingers, I opened Instagram, scrolling through my feed until I found what I was looking for. A post from my cousin Elena, timestamped just 30 minutes ago. Congratulations to the new owner of El Sabor de Casa. So excited for it, Marcus Ramirez, to continue the family legacy. Hashtag new chapter, hashtag family business. The photo showed my entire family. Dad, Mom, my aunts and uncles, cousins, even my grandmother gathered in front of the restaurant. They were all smiling, raising glasses in celebration. Marcus stood in the center, holding up a set of keys. Everyone was there. Everyone except me. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the cold concrete steps of the restaurant. My family's restaurant. My father's legacy, now apparently my brother's property. The business I'd helped build for the past 10 years while Marcus pursued his dreams in California. The place where I'd learned to cook at my father's side, where I'd modernized the accounting systems, where I'd worked 60-hour weeks to keep us afloat during COVID. I'm Diego Ramirez, 34 years old, and until that moment, I thought I was the dedicated son, the one who'd sacrificed everything to preserve our family's dream. What I didn't know then was that this betrayal would unravel decades of lies and force me to confront the bitter truth about family loyalty and the real price of legacy. Growing up in Little Village, El Sabor de Casa was more than just a restaurant. It was the heart of our family. My father, Roberto Ramirez, had opened it in 1983 with recipes passed down from his mother. I spent my childhood in that kitchen, watching him transform simple ingredients into magic, learning the secrets of his mole sauce, and dreaming of the day I'd take over. Marcus, 3 years younger than me, never showed interest in the restaurant. While I was learning to make tamales, he was playing soccer. While I was studying business at UIC so I could help manage the restaurant, he was partying at USC on our parents' dime. When he dropped out after 3 years to find himself in Silicon Valley, my parents called him brave. When I postponed my plans for culinary school to help Dad recover from his heart attack, they called it the least I could do. I remember the day everything started to change, though I didn't recognize it at the time. It was 5 years ago, during the height of the pandemic. The restaurant was struggling like everyone else. I had just finished implementing online ordering and delivery services, working around the clock to keep us relevant. That's when Marcus suddenly showed up, full of big ideas about modernizing and expanding the brand. We need to think bigger, Diego, he'd said, sitting in our family's kitchen while Mom served him his favorite chorizo and eggs. Pop-ups in River North, a food truck fleet, maybe even franchising. El Sabor de Casa could be the next Frontera grill. I argued that our strength was in authenticity, in being a neighborhood cornerstone. Marcus called me small-minded. Dad stayed quiet, but I saw the spark in his eyes when Marcus talked about expansion. Still, when Marcus left a week later, I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Looking back now, I can see all the signs I missed. The hushed conversations that stopped when I entered the room, the private family dinners I wasn't invited to because I was too busy with the restaurant, the way Dad started running major decisions by Marcus over the phone instead of asking me, despite my being there every day. That morning, sitting on the cold steps of the restaurant I'd helped build, I pulled out my phone again and called the one person I knew would give me straight answers. My grandfather's old friend and our family's longtime accountant, Luis Ortiz. Diego, he answered on the first ring. I was just about to call you. What's going on, Luis? The restaurant? Marcus. Meet me at my office, he said quietly. There's something you need to see. Luis's office was a small space above a bakery 3 blocks from the restaurant. When I arrived, he was waiting with a thick folder and a troubled expression. I've been your family's accountant for 30 years, he began. But what they've done, I can't stay quiet anymore. The documents he showed me made my world tilt on its axis. 3 years ago, my father had created a new LLC for the restaurant. On paper, he'd sold El Sabor de Casa to this company for a nominal fee. The LLC had one owner, Marcus. But that wasn't all. The restaurant's profits for the past 3 years had been quietly funneled into this LLC, while the original business, the one I was officially part of, took on more and more debt. They had effectively bankrupted the original restaurant while building a parallel business for Marcus. They used your signature, Louise said softly, showing me a document I supposedly signed giving up my stake in the business. From that power of attorney you signed when you were managing things during your father's recovery. I felt sick. The power of attorney I'd used to keep the restaurant running while Dad recovered from his heart attack had become a weapon against me. They had stolen my inheritance, my future, while I worked myself to the bone keeping their legacy alive. There's more, Louise continued. Remember the original recipes? Your grandmother's notebooks? I nodded. Those handwritten recipes were priceless, the foundation of everything we'd built. Marcus copyrighted them under his new LLC last year. Legally, you can't even use them anymore. My grandmother's recipes. The mole sauce I'd learned to make holding her hand. The tamales we prepared together every Christmas until she passed. Marcus had stolen those too. I left Louise's office in a daze, decades of memories suddenly cast in a harsh new light. Every time they called me boring for focusing on the restaurant instead of pursuing other dreams. Every time they praised Marcus's ambition while dismissing my dedication. Every family gathering where they'd asked when I was going to do something exciting with my life while I was quietly keeping their legacy alive. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. Mijo, why aren't you at the celebration? Marcus wants everyone here for the photos. The casual cruelty of her words made my hands shake. This was the moment everything would change, though they didn't know it yet. I spent the next week methodically building my case. As the person who had modernized the restaurant systems, I had access to everything. Every email, every transaction, every forged document. I hired Maria Gonzalez, a lawyer specializing in business fraud, and gave her everything. This is clear-cut fraud, she confirmed. The forged signatures, the misuse of power of attorney, the fraudulent transfer of assets. They're looking at serious charges. I also had one card they didn't know about. 2 years ago, when Dad was talking about expansion, I'd quietly registered trademarks for our restaurant's name, logo, and signature dishes. Not under the restaurant's LLC, but personally. I'd meant it as protection for our family's legacy. Now, it was protection against them. I waited until their big reopening celebration when Marcus would officially take over. The restaurant was packed with family, friends, and local media covering the heartwarming story of a family business passing to the next generation. I watched through the window as Marcus stood at the front, raising a glass for photos. That's when Maria walked in, accompanied by 2 police officers and a court officer. The cease and desist order was just the beginning. They couldn't use the restaurant's name, logo, or even its signature dishes. The media story quickly changed from heartwarming to scandalous as the fraud allegations emerged. Marcus's dream of expansion crumbled before it began. My mother's calls went from angry to pleading. Marcus's lawyer reached out about a settlement. My father finally came to see me, looking older than I'd ever seen him. We were trying to protect the legacy, he said weakly. Marcus had the vision to take it further. You were always so focused on keeping things the same. The legacy? I laughed bitterly. The legacy was in the people we served, the community we built, not some franchise dream. In the end, the settlement was simple. They would return full control of the original restaurant to me, admit to their fraud, and Marcus would stay out of the restaurant business in Chicago. In return, I wouldn't press criminal charges. That was 2 years ago. El Sabor de Casa is still open, still serving the same community. I did end up changing things, but not the way Marcus wanted. We now have a culinary training program for neighborhood kids. Every month, we host free dinners for local families in need. The legacy lives on, just not in the way my family expected. Marcus moved back to California. My parents split their time between there and Chicago, carefully maintaining the fiction of a happy family on social media. Most of our extended family chose sides, and most didn't choose mine. But I found that legacy isn't just about blood. Last week, I was teaching a group of teenage apprentices how to make my grandmother's mole sauce. One girl, Maria, asked me why I do this, teach others our secret recipes. Because legacy isn't about ownership, I told her, watching her carefully toast the chilies just like my grandmother taught me. It's about passing on what matters to those who will cherish it. As I write this, sitting in my office above the restaurant, I can't hear the kitchen bustling below. The recipes are the same, but the hands making them are different. Young hands, eager to learn, to preserve, to continue the real legacy of El Sabor de Casa. Sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't in destroying what others tried to steal, but in sharing it with those who truly deserve it. The sign in our window still reads family-owned since 1983, because it is, just not the family I was born into, but the one I chose to build. What I didn't expect was how my story would ripple through our community. Last month, Elena, my cousin who had posted that celebratory photo, reached out to me. She'd left her husband's failing real estate business and needed a job. I almost deleted her message, but something in her words caught my attention. She mentioned how she'd watched from the sidelines as my parents and Marcus had plotted. She'd stayed quiet out of fear of being ostracized, just like they'd done to me. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop far from Little Village. The Elena who sat across from me was different from the polished social media influencer I remembered. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a worn sweater. I knew what they were doing, she said quietly, stirring her coffee. I helped Marcus set up his social media campaigns while they were planning everything. I thought if I played along, they'd help Jorge with his business deals. But they just used us too. Turns out, Marcus had promised startup funding to several family members in exchange for their silence and support. Money he'd planned to take from the restaurant's profits. Elena, Jorge, my cousin Raphael's tech startup, they'd all been promised a piece of the expanding family empire. But now Marcus was back in California, working as a junior marketing manager. All his grand plans collapsed, and those who'd sided with him were left with nothing but broken promises. I hired Elena to manage our social media and community outreach. She had the skills and, more importantly, she understood what we were trying to build. Something authentic, something that gave back to the community. Slowly, others started reaching out too. Cousin Raphael now helps maintain our online ordering system. Jorge's daughter, Maria, is one of our most promising culinary students. The family web that had once been used to exclude me was being rewoven into something stronger, something real. But not everyone was ready to accept the new reality. Last week, my mother showed up unannounced during our monthly community dinner. The dining room was full of neighborhood families, kids running around, elderly couples sharing plates of food, just like it used to be in the old days. I saw her standing in the doorway, taking it all in, her face a mix of emotions. She'd aged in the past 2 years, her carefully maintained appearance showing cracks. "Diego," she said when I approached her, voice barely above a whisper, "Your father's sick." I felt the familiar pull, the urge to drop everything and rush to help, just like I always had. But I'd learned my lesson about blind family loyalty. "How sick?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Cancer," she said. "He starts treatment next week. He wants to make things right before." I cut her off. "Before what? Before it's too late? Like it was too late when you were stealing my future? Like it was too late when you watched me work myself to exhaustion while funneling everything to Marcus?" She flinched at my words but pressed on. "He knows he made mistakes. We all did. But you're his son, his firstborn. He needs you." I looked around at my restaurant, at the families enjoying their meals, at Elena teaching a young busboy how to properly set tables, at the walls now covered with photos of our culinary students graduating, our community events, our real family legacy. "Tell Dad I'll visit him," I said finally, "but not at home. At the restaurant. Here. Where it all started, where it almost ended, and where we built something new from the ashes of what you destroyed." She nodded, tears in her eyes, and turned to leave but stopped at the door. "The food," she said softly. "It smells just like Mama's kitchen." "It should," I replied. "It's still her recipe, just made with different hands and a bigger heart." Tomorrow, Dad will come to the restaurant for the first time in 2 years. I don't know if redemption is possible after such calculated betrayal, but I do know this. The legacy of El Sabor de Casa was never about one family's ownership. It was about creating a place where people could feel at home, where traditions could be passed down, where community could thrive. Sometimes the hardest lessons about family come from learning when to let go and when to build something new. My father might be ready to make amends, but I'm no longer the son desperate for his approval. I'm the owner of El Sabor de Casa, not just the restaurant, but the dream of what it could be, a dream bigger than any expansion plans Marcus ever had. Because while they were planning to franchise our family's legacy, I was busy making it immortal, teaching it, sharing it, letting it grow beyond the bounds of blood and betrayal into something that will outlive us all. And maybe that's the real revenge. Not just surviving their betrayal, but thriving in spite of it, building something so beautiful from the ashes of their deception that even they can't help but wish they'd been part of it all along. Dad came to the restaurant today. I hadn't seen him in person since that day he tried to justify stealing my future. He looked smaller somehow, his confident stance replaced by a slight stoop, his designer clothes hanging loose on his frame. I had Elena clear the dining room for an hour, giving us privacy, but I made sure to leave the kitchen running, the sounds and smells of cooking filling the air just like they had when I was a kid learning at his side. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, taking it all in. I could see his eyes moving over the changes. The wall of student photos, the community awards, the new specials board advertising our cooking classes. "You've done well," he said finally, his voice rougher than I remembered. Better than we would have. I didn't respond, just pulled out a chair at our best table, the one by the window where he used to sit every Sunday after church counting the day's receipts and planning the next week's menu. The doctors say 6 months, maybe a year with treatment, he continued, sitting down heavily. I don't want to go knowing things are still broken between us. I sat across from him, the table between us feeling like a gulf of decades of hurt and betrayal. You broke them, I said quietly. You and Mom and Marcus. You broke everything we built here. I know, he whispered, and for the first time, I saw real tears in my father's eyes. Not the manipulative ones he'd used when trying to convince me to accept their betrayal, but genuine grief. We thought we were building something bigger, something that would put our name in lights, but we lost sight of what made this place special. One of my students, Maria, appeared with 2 plates of mole enchiladas, the sauce made exactly like Grandma taught me. Dad's eyes widened at the first bite. It's perfect, he said, his voice cracking. Just like Mama's. Better, I corrected. Her recipe, but made with love for everyone, not just family. That's what you never understood. This place was never meant to be an empire. It was meant to be a home. We ate in silence for a while, the familiar tastes bringing back memories both sweet and bitter. I could see him struggling to find words to bridge the gap between us. I found your old notebook, he said finally, reaching into his jacket. The one where you used to draw pictures of how you wanted the restaurant to look someday. He pulled out a worn composition book I'd forgotten about from when I was 12 or 13, filled with my childish sketches of community dinners, cooking classes, families gathered around tables, everything I'd actually built here while they were chasing their expansion dreams. You saw it even then, he continued, what this place could really be. We were so busy looking at numbers and profits, we forgot to look at heart. I took the notebook, feeling its worn pages. The dreams I'd had before their betrayal had made me build them out of spite instead of love. Marcus asked about you, he added hesitantly. He's not doing well in California. I closed the notebook carefully. That's his journey now, just like this is mine. I've learned some things can't be fixed, Dad. Some betrayals cut too deep. But that doesn't mean we can't build something new from the ashes. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, returning with a small container of mole sauce packaged to go. For your next round of treatment, I said. The nurses can heat it up. It'll taste better than hospital food. He clutched the container like a lifeline, understanding the gesture for what it was. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe never, but a small bridge across the gulf between us. I'll teach you the recipe, I added. If you want to come to one of our community classes, you can learn alongside everyone else. Start fresh. He nodded, tears flowing freely now. I'd like that, he whispered. As he left, I watched him pause to look at the photos on our wall, lingering on one of our latest graduating class. Everyone in Chef's Whites proudly holding their certificates, the future of El Sabor de Casa bright and full of promise. The sign in our window caught the setting sun, family-owned since 1983. But family has a different meaning now. It's not about blood or betrayal or broken dreams. It's about the people who choose to be here, who choose to learn and grow and build together. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying what hurt you. It's about building something so beautiful that even those who tried to destroy you have to admit you built it better than their grandest schemes. Dad starts his first treatment tomorrow. Elena's handling the restaurant, so I can drive him. She suggested it herself, saying family is about showing up even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I don't know if I'll ever fully trust them again. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe sometimes healing comes not from restoring what was broken but from building something entirely new from the pieces. Something stronger, more beautiful, and more meaningful than what came before. After all, isn't that what my grandmother's recipes were really about? Taking simple ingredients and transforming them into something magical. Something that could bring people together even across the boundaries of hurt and time and betrayal. Tomorrow, I'll teach another class, sharing her secrets with eager students while my father begins his fight across town. And somehow, in the alchemy of cooking and healing, maybe we'll all find a way forward, not back to what was, but ahead to what could be. Because in the end, legacy isn't about ownership or control or even family names. It's about love freely given, wisdom freely shared, and the courage to keep building even when others try to tear you down. 3 months have passed since Dad started treatment. I drive him every Tuesday and Thursday. The hospital visits have become a strange kind of ritual between us. Sometimes we talk about the restaurant, sometimes about his treatment, but mostly we sit in comfortable silence, the kind that comes when you stop trying to fix everything at once. Last week, something unexpected happened. I was reviewing applications for our next culinary training program when I found one that made my heart stop. Marcus's daughter, Sophia, had applied. She's 17 now, almost the same age I was when I first started seriously working in the kitchen. I hadn't seen Sophia since everything fell apart. She'd moved to California with Marcus, but according to her application, she's been living with my mother for the past month, wanting to finish high school in Chicago. The application was good, really good. Her essay talked about watching cooking videos online, trying to recreate her grandmother's recipes from memory, missing the taste of home. She wrote about wanting to learn the real way, not just from videos. I called Elena into my office, showing her the application. "What do you think?" I asked. She read it carefully, then looked at me. "You always say legacy isn't about blood," she said, "but maybe sometimes blood finds its way back to legacy anyway." I approved Sophia's application that afternoon. She showed up for her first class yesterday, looking so much like my grandmother it hurt, tall and proud, with the same determined set to her jaw. I saw my father watching from his usual table by the window, his eyes wet with tears. Marcus called later that night, the first time we'd spoken in 2 years. His voice was different, humbler somehow. He started with thank you, not excuses. "I hear you're taking good care of Dad," he said, "and now Sophia. She talks about nothing but your classes." I waited, letting the silence stretch between us. "I messed up, Diego," he finally continued. "I thought I could buy success, steal it even, from my own brother. But watching Dad get sick, seeing Sophia light up when she talks about cooking, it's made me realize what I threw away." I thought about Sophia in class that morning, how her hands had trembled just slightly as she chopped onions the same way mine used to, her quiet determination to get it right. "She has potential," I said finally. "Real potential, not the kind you can buy." There was a long pause, then, "I never wanted the restaurant," he admitted. "I just wanted Dad to look at me the way he looked at you when you cooked." The irony of his words wasn't lost on me. How we'd both spent years chasing our father's approval in different ways, how it had nearly destroyed us both. "Sophia's first family dinner service is next week," I said. "You should come, not for me or Dad, but for her. She deserves to have her father see her shine." He was quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. "I'd like that," he finally whispered. Today, I watched Sophia practice making tortillas, her hands growing more confident with each try. Elena stood nearby, offering quiet guidance. Dad dozed in his chair by the window, weak from his latest treatment, but peaceful. The restaurant was quiet, preparing for dinner service, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows, catching the steam from the kitchen, making everything look soft and golden. I thought about how life moves in circles, how the very things that break us can sometimes lead us back to ourselves in unexpected ways. Tomorrow, Sophia will learn my grandmother's mole recipe. The one Marcus tried to steal, the one that's now being taught to anyone who wants to learn it. She'll add her own touch to it, I'm sure, just like I did, just like every cook does, making it both old and new at the same time. And maybe that's what healing really looks like. Not a perfect restoration, but a gentle evolution, taking what was broken and making it into something new, something that honors the past while growing beyond it. Dad's doctors say his treatment is going better than expected. Sophia's tortillas are almost as good as mine now, and next week, Marcus will sit in our dining room watching his daughter cook in the kitchen that was almost his, but has become so much more than any of us imagined. The sign still says family-owned since 1983, and maybe, finally, we're all learning what that really means. Last night was Sophia's graduation dinner from our culinary program. The restaurant was packed with faces both old and new. Marcus sat at the family table next to Dad, who was having a good day, his color better than it's been in weeks. Mom was there too, sitting quietly beside Elena, watching everything with tears in her eyes. Sophia cooked the entire meal herself. A perfect blend of old and new, her own take on our family recipes, subtle changes that somehow made them even better. She moved through the kitchen with the same confidence I once saw in my grandmother, that quiet certainty that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you're meant to do. When she brought out her final dish, a mole that filled the room with the scent of my childhood, I saw Marcus reach for Dad's hand, both of them understanding without words what was happening here. This wasn't just a graduation. This was redemption playing out across generations. After the guests left, Sophia asked me to sit with her in the empty dining room. She pulled out a notebook filled with recipes, some from our classes, some her own creations. "I want to open my own place someday," she said. "But I want to do it right, not like—" She stopped, looking guiltily at the kitchen where Marcus was helping clean up. "Not like your dad did," I finished for her. "It's okay to say it." She nodded, then surprised me by asking, "Would you help me when I'm ready? Be my mentor, like Grandma was for you?" I looked at this young woman, my niece, who had somehow become the bridge our family needed, who had taken our broken legacy and seen only possibility. "Of course," I said, "but you know what the real secret is?" "What?" "It's not about the recipes or the restaurant or even the family name. It's about building something that's bigger than yourself, something that becomes a home for others. She smiled that same smile my grandmother used to have. I know, Tio, she said. That's what you built here. This morning, I came in early to do paperwork and found Dad sitting in his usual spot by the window. He's been coming in most mornings lately just to watch the kitchen wake up. Remember when you were little? He said as I sat down with our coffees. You used to say you wanted to make the restaurant magic. I nodded. You did it, Mijo, he said softly. Just not the way any of us expected. You made it magic by giving it away. He's right. In the end, that's what saved El Sabor de Casa. Not keeping it in the family, but letting it become something that belonged to everyone. Marcus is moving back to Chicago next month. He's not asking for anything. Just wants to be closer to Sophia, to Dad, to the life we're all building here. Mom started volunteering at our community cooking classes, quietly making peace in her own way. And me? I'm watching it all unfold, feeling neither triumphant nor bitter. Just peaceful, understanding finally that sometimes the greatest victory isn't in winning, but in transforming the very thing you were fighting over. Tomorrow, we're starting a new tradition. Monthly family cooking classes where anyone can come, learn our recipes, share their own, and create something new together. Sophia will teach the first one, sharing her version of the mole that started everything. The sign still says family-owned since 1983, but now when people ask about the family, they mean all of us. The students, the teachers, the community members, the regulars, even my once broken family, slowly healing dish by dish, recipe by recipe, moment by moment. Sometimes the best endings aren't really endings at all, but new beginnings disguised as closure. This isn't the end of our story. It's just the start of a different one where legacy isn't something you inherit or steal, but something you build together. One meal, one lesson, one person at a time. And maybe that's the real magic of El Sabor de Casa. Not that it survived betrayal, but that it grew stronger because of it, teaching all of us that the taste of home isn't just in the recipes. It's in the hearts of those who choose to gather at our tables again and again, making family out of strangers and strength out of pain until finally, we all find our way home.